Will Dawn of War 4 be the next major real-time strategy title? Hey everybody, I'm HelpingHans, an avid RTS player and a huge fan of Warhammer and the Dawn of War franchise. Today I'll be discussing what we know so far concerning Dawn of War 4 and what the chances are for the game to be a worldwide success. First, let's talk about the difference between RTS games that are simply successful and those that truly go global. For me, an RTS game that has gone global is something like Age of Empires, Warcraft 3, or StarCraft. Titles that have stood the test of time and still maintain large active player bases today. Last year, we had the release of another new RTS title, Tempest Rising, and by all accounts had been a huge success for the development team Slipgate Ironworks. The game currently boasts an 88 positive review score, which is undeniably impressive. That being said, the player base at its peak was under 10,000 and now struggles to get above 1,000 concurrent players. Now, why is this the case? Personally, I've played Tempest Rising and I thoroughly enjoyed the campaign and played a bit of multiplayer too. However, as a full-time competitive RTS player and content creator, it doesn't make sense for me to consistently create content for this title if there isn't a substantial player base or multiplayer scene. Although I believe Tempest Rising to be a solid RTS game, it sadly did not tick all the right boxes for it to go global, and that is what I will discuss next in relation to Dawn of War 4. So, the first box that needs to be ticked is game sales. Do we think the game will sell well initially? If so, it will likely have future DLC and content. In the case of Dawn of War 4, I believe it is likely to sell well initially due to the successful hype that I've been seeing online. Furthermore, there is already a dedicated Warhammer 40k fan base that continues to grow, and prior Dawn of War fans from previous installments in the franchise that are keen to check out the latest title. Now, if we compare this to Tempest Rising for instance, this game was a brand new IP and therefore had no initial fan base to build from. You could say that it was the spiritual successor to the Command & Conquer franchise, however, that IP hasn't seen much love in many years, whereas Warhammer 40k's popularity is going from strength to strength. There have been many successful Warhammer games in recent years, and we've also recently had the announcement of a Total War Warhammer 40k game too, which has just hit over 1 million wishlists on Steam. In addition to this, if the Amazon show with Henry Cavill does well, it could catapult the Warhammer 40k universe to insane popularity levels like we've seen with Game of Thrones. However, it's likely that this show is still a long way off. The development team King Art Games have also held multiple Ask Me Anything sessions and have brought out consistent updates, which is generating trust from the community, which will also help in sales. For the game to continue to sell well and continue to grow its player base after the initial release hype, it will need to have the next few things. Will Dawn of War 4 have a great storyline that hooks players? This will determine if players will get invested enough to want to keep playing even after they finish the campaign. Now, for Dawn of War 4, it has been made public that John French is writing the story for this game. He is a prolific Black Library author, which is the official publishing arm of Games Workshop, who own the Warhammer 40k IP. It's safe to say he knows the lore of the Warhammer 40k universe well, and the general sentiment for reviews of his past works are positive. So if that's anything to go by, then the story of Dawn of War 4 should be solid. Furthermore, we know that for the first time ever, a Primarch will be playable in the form of Lionel Johnson, as well as the Dark Angel Space Marine chapter, which has many people hyped, as you can see here from these comments. Now, the next topic, which is arguably one of the biggest challenges RTS games face, is onboarding. Is the tutorial easy enough for new players to comprehend, or are there even systems in place for people who are completely new to RTS games? Now, this is something I haven't seen mentioned much on the official Dawn of War 4 Discord or on their social media outlets. Jan Thayson, the co-founder of King Art Games and game director for Dawn of War 4, did mention they have added in some aspects to make things easier for new players. In an MAA post, he comments that there are auto buttons available, like automatically reinforcing your units throughout a match once a certain button has been enabled. Personally, the onboarding aspect is one of my biggest concerns, and I would like to see more information from King Art Games on what further actions or steps they have taken in this regard to onboarding, as I believe this is a big barrier to entry for new players. Especially since many potential players may have never played an RTS before. One interesting example I've seen in recent years of onboarding players is in the upcoming game Immortals Gates of Pyre. It has a minigame where players are given a random set of units against an enemy set of units, and they have the choice to either engage or disengage from a fight. This is a fun training tool for new players as it allows them to quickly understand unit matchups and counters, while also seeing how many times they can get the decision correct, which they then can compare to their friends or on a global leaderboard. Moving on to the next subject of discussion, and that is multiplayer. Is the game set up to foster a strong multiplayer scene? Competitive players will look for responsiveness of their units, diverse and fun factions with interesting mechanics. In addition to this, players will want leaderboards, observer modes and incentives to climb ranks like in-game rewards or tournament cash prizes. For Dawn of War 4, in the last Ask Me Anything session in December, it was revealed that the game will have a replay and observer mode. However, whether or not this will be ready for the release of the game is uncertain at this point. We do know that the developers have said that they want to focus on building the campaign and PvE experience first and foremost. Therefore, as that is their priority, I doubt we will see things like leagues, seasons and in-game rewards for launch. In my opinion, I believe this is the right approach initially, even though I am a competitive PvP player myself, as the game needs to have a solid foundation first. That being said though, I believe having rewards for doing well in PvP will really encourage players to get involved in multiplayer. I believe the RTS game Age of Empires 4 does a great job in this regard, with rewarding players with unique profile avatars and statues for their town centres each season based on their ladder rankings. Moving on, let's now talk about modding. Will it be available on launch and how in depth will it be? Strong modding features allows the fans of the games to constantly keep crafting and creating fresh content for people to enjoy to keep the player base strong and vibrant. I'm sure many of you watching this video will know the power that modding can have, as we've seen MOBA games like Dota and League of Legends spawn from the modding ability and scene that was available in Warcraft 3. In the Ask Me Anything session in October, King Games have expressed it is on their radar, however they weren't able to discuss anything at that time. So it's completely up in the air if it will be available at all. Based on my own interpretation of the GIF Jan posted, he would like to talk about it, but can't because it's just not ready yet, or they can't promise it. I can't stress enough how important this is, especially for Dawn of War 4, because we've seen how prevalent the modding scene has been in the past in this franchise, with things like the Ultimate Apocalypse Overhaul mod for Dawn of War 1, which has been a huge success and kept that game alive. Now, what about content and features? Will there be enough at launch? Most certainly yes. It has been revealed that the game will have over 70 campaign missions, 4 factions at launch being Orcs, Necrons, Space Marines and the Adeptus Mechanicus, with over 100 units and structures. Each campaign for the factions can be played co-op, as well as 30 skirmish and multiplayer maps. A Last Stand game mode has also been announced, which fans of Dawn of War 2 will be very pleased about, and there will be different commanders for each faction. Finally, an army painter, custom profile options and custom hotkeys are available, so there's a lot of content and features at launch. All of this bodes really well for Dawn of War 4's start in life. Next up we have marketing. Will the game have a strong marketing campaign in the run up to release? If not, then it will probably need a strong launch to have it spread by word of mouth. Will there be adverts on TV, YouTube and streaming sites? Will there be billboard posters for the game and posters at bus stops? Not only that, but how will they try and market? Because obviously they want to reach out to as many people as possible, so they need to look at specific ways to attract all kinds of potential players and not just your typical RTS fan. Personally, I don't believe I've seen any adverts for Dawn of War 4, apart from maybe a YouTube ad, but maybe you have. I'd be curious to see where you saw these ads, so please let me know in the comment section below. Another important aspect we must consider, guys, is development expertise and legacy. King Games, a video game development team from Bremen in Germany, has taken the mantle from Relic Entertainment to become the new studio behind the Dawn of War franchise. To have an idea of how good Dawn of War 4 is likely to be, it's important to look at King Games' portfolio and past titles. In this instance, it's best to look at their first major strategy title, which was Iron Harvest back in 2020, which by all accounts was a success for the studio. It currently sits at a 75% mostly positive review score on Steam and has a 75 Metacritic review score as well. I played through the main campaign and I remembered I very much enjoyed the missions and story. Other strengths of Iron Harvest were in its impressive huge steampunk mech units and building destruction. This clip shows my excitement back in 2020 when I first saw one of the big mechs walking into a building for the first time. Sorry about the purple hair, I did dye it for charity.
Will it walk through the building and destroy it? Oh my god, that's so cool! Fuck yes! Dude, that's so cool! Oh my god! Dude, it walked through the building!
This bodes well for Dawn of War 4 because there are many huge mechanical entities in the game, and I believe King Art Games will do justice bringing them to life. On the downside to Iron Harvest, I personally felt the game lacked serious depth to the units, with minimal abilities and upgrades, along with a clunkiness to pathing and microing. I have shared these views with developers in person at previous events like Gamescom, and they did admit it was an area they needed to work on. I'm glad to hear that they've recognised this and to know they've had 5 or so years to improve on their formula. Now, let's move on to Legacy. The last installment in the franchise, Dawn of War 3, which came out in 2017, is often joked about in the community as the one in the franchise that shouldn't be talked about or doesn't exist. To put it short, the game had an identity crisis as Relic Entertainment, the previous developers, tried to make it an RTS MOBA hybrid, which ended up alienating the player base. That, along with a lackluster campaign, led to poor reviews and a rapidly decreasing player base. As a result, Relic abandoned all further development and cancelled the upcoming Necron DLC that they had teased at the end of Dawn of War 3's campaign. Dawn of War 3 left a bad taste in many players' mouths, and I worry that, along with past people's bad experiences with Iron Harvest, might result in a more pessimistic or cautious view of Dawn of War 4. Here are a bunch of comments from people expressing these exact concerns. For Dawn of War 4 to succeed here, King Art Games must continue to showcase how far they've come in perfecting their animations with smooth combat and pathing. In addition to this, they need to show off ease and responsiveness of units and deep dives into these units themselves to spotlight their depth and utility. This will assure potential players that they know what they are doing and are doing it well. And finally, let's talk about funding. Has Dawn of War 4 received sufficient funding to be a successful title? Well, as far as funding goes, it has been reported that on King Art Games' official website that they have received 2.6 million euros in funding from the German government as a form of grant back in 2024. Here you can see the reference to a strategy title called Tabletop, which we now know to be Dawn of War 4. This is a substantial amount, but we all know game development can and does take many millions these days to fund. Other than this amount, it hasn't been made public how much other funding King Art Games has received. Even if King Art Games has acquired impressive funding, it does not necessarily translate into a good game. However, what I've seen and heard so far, I'm quite optimistic, but cautious. I mean, you kind of have to be if you're an RTS fan these days, because there's been so many games that have come out that have kind of been a disappointment. That brings us to the end of the video, guys. So how are you feeling? Are you also optimistic and cautious, or maybe the opposite and you're feeling quite pessimistic about it? Regardless, please let me know in the comment section below, because I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts are. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. I'm aiming to make a lot more Dawn of War 4 content to come in the future, being that competitive casts, tutorial, guides, you name it, I'll be trying to make that type of content. Until the next video, guys, take care. Thanks for watching.